The consequences are starting to roll in for the town of Milton, which voted to defy state law last week, tossing out new multifamily zoning rules mandated by the MBTA Communities Law. In response, the Healey administration announced it's pulling several thousands of dollars of grant money from Milton. So how big a deal is the funding cut, and how should Milton move forward? I'm joined now by Denny Swenson. She helped lead the No campaign against the new zoning rules. She's also a town meeting member and happens to be a former GBH producer. And I'm also joined by one of the leaders of the Yes campaign, Tom Callahan, also a town meeting member. Thank you both for being here. Denny, as I said, I want to talk about what is going to happen next and what you two would like to see happen next. But to do that, I feel like we need to unpack the vote just briefly. From your vantage point, why did Milton vote no last week?
The bylaw that failed last week was built on a misclassification. Milton is not a rapid transit community, and that was the major premise that the bylaw was built on. The citizens, by and large, know that that historic trolley that can only fit 38 passengers could not, address the needs of 2,500 new zoned units.
Okay, this is the trolley that links up with the Red Line ultimately, and being classed as a rapid transit community meant that you needed to engage in the most aggressive level of building under this new law, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, Tom, what's your take on why no one?
Yeah, I think the voters had one alternative in front of them. It was something put forward, a zoning article put forward by the yes side. It complied with state law. The no side did not put up an alternative article. We're the only town that's actually not debated competing articles. And the no side still, even last night in the planning board, their allies on the planning board, has not made any progress. Matter of fact, they said last night they're not going to have an article that's compliant at all. They're going to try to...
The Milton Planning Board said that last night.
Yeah,
that's important.
They're going to double down on the argument Denny just was talking about, which is trying to pursue reclassification. The state has made that clear. We're a rapid transit community, and we think that's a losing argument.
So this actually, that we have accelerated very, very, very quickly to a point that I was hoping to get to a little bit later, but let's talk about it. The question of classification. Denny, you like the idea of Milton going to the state and saying, hey, you've misidentified us. We don't have the same level of mass transit access that these other communities do, so we shouldn't have to build as aggressively. So were you heartened by what the planning board indicated they're going to do moving forward this week?
Yes. Last night, the planning board listened to the mandate that was set by the voters last week. They listened to the citizens who have been saying that they do not see Milton as a rapid transit community. Other towns with far more rapid transit and far more transit have been reclassified. It is our position that we have been classified wrongfully and that we would like to be reclassified as adjacent community. And at that point, we could actually meet the goals of the legislation. The bylaw that failed last week was not meeting the goals of the legislation as far as climate sustainability, our Milton goals of increasing affordable housing and traffic mitigation, and many of the other worthy goals that we should be striving for.
You mentioned that. You and I talked to you and I talked to Tom before the segment. Why would the plan that Milton shot down, why would that have not met goals involving climate resiliency and affordable housing? And then, Tom, we'll get back to you.
So they were going, the bylaw would put 1,100 units in East Milton, which would require, you couldn't walk to the trolley from there because you'd have to cross an on-ramp and an exit ramp to a highway, and then you wouldn't be able to walk as the crow flies going through people's yards and other, private properties. You'd have to walk a great distance to get to the trolley. So it wasn't a transit-friendly approach, and it would put, the vehicles of 1,100 residences onto the roadway, causing idling cars, which is really bad for the environment. And then you would need to get to the trolley where there isn't enough parking for those, it would be 1,700 net new units in town. There would not be enough parking, so we'd have to give up houses in neighborhoods for parking lots, which isn't great for the environment.
Okay.
And then you'd get a trolley that only fits 38 passengers. So it was just a common sense issue after issue after issue.
Tom, Denny mentioned that, as she sees it, the plan that was voted down would have exacerbated the affordable housing shortage in Milton. If I understand correctly, Denny, you can tell me if I'm getting this right or not, but that is because the MBTA Communities Law actually does not require that the new housing that's built is affordable. You mentioned, Denny, when we talked, that Milton has struggled to meet the required level of affordable housing under state law. But I saw you shaking your head when I was suggesting, or when I was paraphrasing Denny's argument, that would have made the affordable housing situation worse. Why were you shaking your head?
Well, I think, first of all, building more housing is going to help with the housing affordability issue.
Simply as a matter of supply and demand,
Supply,
you build more,
right.
more
We need supply. That's what the MBTA Communities Act is all about. It's about supply. It's about market rate supply, and yes, there is an affordable component. Milton has opted in, or the article that was turned down had opted into 10%. There was an effort. I think one of the few things the no and yes sides agree on is that 10% of housing would be affordable, should be increased to 15 or 16 or 17%. I think we both agree on that. Both sides agree on that. But essentially what the no side is saying is we shouldn't do our part in the greater Boston housing crisis. By being reclassified, I don't think that we're going to be reclassified. But that's going from zoning for 2,400 units to 950 units. That's a lot of units. If every community got away with that, we would not solve the housing crisis and the supply crisis. And Milton is trying to get away with something that no other community has been able to do.
Now, you say that Milton's trying to get away with something no other community has been able to do. But, Denny, I heard you mention earlier that communities have been able to be reclassified. Is that correct?
So they were not reclassified. They were, once the state drafted regulations, and certain communities like Arlington, the state agreed shouldn't be considered rapid transit because no subway or no transit line runs through that. So a bunch of communities were in the draft regulation guideline stage.
Went from one
category to another.
Okay.
But no one has been reclassified. No individual community has appealed and been granted reclassification.
All right, so I want to get into now, if we can. We have less time than I'd intended to, but possible room for agreement between the no and yes sides. Denny, you like the idea of reclassification, diminishing the amount that Milton's required to build. You're not a fan of that idea. Is that something that you could imagine a concerted opposition toward taking shape, or not? Or
I think the AG is going to have to weigh in here. I think the AG I think a court is going to have to convince Milton that we're a rapid transit community. By the way, rapid doesn't apply to how fast the trolley goes. It applies to how frequently the service is, and it's every 6 to 10 minutes in rush hour. And that's what makes us a rapid transit community.
Denny, what do you see as possible grounds for maybe not unity, but collaboration, cooperation moving forward as the town tries to, because my sense is when you and I talked, you stressed that you want the town to be in compliance with this law. You just don't think that the demands currently being made to be in compliance are appropriate. So what do you see as any sort of common ground that the no and yes sides might be able to work from?
I mean, I think that we all agree that, and the residents by and large want to be compliant, and they want to be part of the solution. And I think coming up with 900, zoned units is part of the solution. I think we need to be treated fairly by the state and accurately by the state. It's a small trolley that can fit 38 passengers. We need solutions. We need to work together. Just a more constructive approach to meet the legislative goals of, transit-oriented traffic mitigation, climate sustainability, and affordability. The article that failed last week, it was only 10% affordable with the development that would be over 10 units. All the development that would take place under 10 units would be 100% market rate. We want it to be at least 15%. I appreciate that Tom wants it to be, the percentage to go up as well. The idea of doing that later, of zoning it first and then seeking that later, was of concern to our citizens because other towns did the feasibility study prior to bringing it to town meeting, and they learned that what they had zoned didn't pass and wouldn't have gone through as 15% affordable. So we didn't want to give away the farm and not be able to get it back later. We want to do our zoning right. And zoning by fear is not a good way to go. These fast track, look at a map and see where you can put 2,500 units and do it quickly was not working out. If you drove the actual, places where it was going to be placed, there were just a lot of issues that ran in the face of the legislative goals.
I want to get Tom in here with a final word. You are hoping that the Attorney General, tell me if I'm getting this right, sues Milton and establishes that you are in fact a rapid transit community with the maximum commitment required. Am I getting that right?
I don't know if she would have to sue us. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the
two of us.
Procedure is, but I think it's ultimately going to be decided by the courts. The courts are going to either rule that we're rapid transit or not. I don't think there's a strong case for us being not a rapid transit community, but the courts will have to decide because we have a planning board that is doubling down on this reclassification effort, and I think the only thing that will convince them, dissuade them from that effort, is the courts.
All right. On that note, Tom Callahan, Denny Swenson, thank you for talking this through. Very complicated and very important stuff.